Happy Monday, my sunshines. I hope you had a wonderful spring break and you got to relax and do everything you wanted to do. Over break, we did get the news that we're not going to be going back to school for the end of the year, which is really, really sad. And I already miss you so much. And we are still going to be doing learning at home. And I'm hoping, and I want you to email me if you agree, that we should be doing lunch bunch over Zoom. And I'm going to create a schedule so that it's not going to be everyone because it's too much. Maybe like 5-6 people. But I'll figure it out. And then I was thinking also we should do once a week writer's notebook sharing, because I know we love that, and that would be a really great way for us to be together and sharing and still hear each other. So, and I am thinking, and Toby thinks that's a good idea, and I am thinking that we should also have a reunion once everything comes down and we can get back to each other and we can have a party and maybe over the summer. So, Toby, go away. Toby's enjoying himself. All right. So, this next chapter is called The Platinum Blonde Man, which if you've read the book or seen the movie, you might know what's happening, and it's very funny, I'll tell you. There was no doubt in Matilda's mind that this latest display of foulness by her father deserved severe punishment, and as she sat eating her awful fried fish and fried chips and ignored the television, her brain went to work on various possibilities. By the time she went up to the bed, her mind was made up. The next morning she got up early and went into the bathroom and locked the door. As we already know, Mrs. Wormwood's hair was dyed a brilliant platinum blonde, very much the same glistening silvery color as a female tightrope walker. The big dyeing job was done twice a year at the hairdresser's, but every month or so in between, Mrs. Wormwood used to freshen up by giving it a rinse in the wash bin with something called platinum blonde hair dye extra strong. This also served to dye the nasty brown hairs that kept growing from the roots underneath. So the roots are like here. So if you've ever seen an adult who has their hair dyed, you'll know, because usually you can see here, like I don't have my hair dyed, it's all the same color, but let's say I was blonde, this would be blonde, and then this would be my hair, the dark brown. So that's what she's talking about, that she could see the hair, and so then she dyes that part. The bottle of platinum blonde hair dye, extra strong, was kept in the cupboard in the bathroom, and underneath the tile on the label were written the words, "Caution, this is peroxide. Keep away from children." Matilda had read it many times with fascination. Matilda's father had a fine crop of black hair, which he parted in the middle, and of which he was exceedingly proud of. "Good strong hair," he would say fondly, "means that there's a good strong brain underneath. Like Shakespeare," Matilda had said once to him. "Like who?" "Shakespeare, Daddy." "Was he brainy?" "Very, Daddy." "He has masses of hair, didn't he?" "He was bald, Daddy." To which the father had snapped, "If you can't talk sense, then shut up." Anyway, Mr. Wormwood would keep his hair looking bright and strong, or so he thought, by rubbing into it every morning large quantities of lotion called Oil of Violet's Hair Tonic. A bottle of this smelly purple mixture always stood on the shelf above the sink in the bathroom, alongside all the toothbrushes, and a very generous scalp massage with the oil of violets took place daily after shaving was complete. This hair and scalp massage was always accompanied by loud masculine grunts and heavy breathing and rasps. "Ah, that's better. Oh, that's the stuff. Rub it right into the roots. That's beautiful. Oh, it will look wonderful," which could clearly be heard by Matilda in her bedroom across the corridor. Now, in the early morning privacy of the bathroom, Matilda unscrewed the cap of her father's oil of violets and tipped 3/4 of the contents down the drain. Then she filled the bottle up with her mother's platinum blonde hair dye extra strong. Now, what is her dad's hair color? Almost black. So he's not gonna know what's gonna happen. She carefully left enough of her father's original hair tonic in the bottle so that when she gave it a good shake, the whole thing still looked reasonably purple. She then replaced the bottle on the shelf above the sink, taking care to put her mother's bottle back in the cupboard. So far, so good, she thought. At breakfast time, Matilda sat quickly at the dining room table eating her cornflakes. Her brother sat opposite of her, with his back to the door, devouring hunks of bread, smothered with a mixture of peanut butter and strawberry jam. The mother was so out of sight around the corner in the kitchen, making Mr. Woodman's breakfast, which always had to be 2 fried eggs on fried bread with 3 pork sausages and 3 strips of bacon and some fried tomatoes. That's a big breakfast. And at this point, Mr. Wormwood came noisily into the room. He was incapable of entering any room quietly, especially at breakfast time. He always had to make his appearance felt immediately by creating lots of noise and clutter. One could almost hear him saying, "It's me, hello, I'm here." The greatest man himself, the master of the house, the wage earner, the one who makes it all possible for the rest of you to live so well. Notice me and pay your respects. On this occasion, he strode in and slapped his son on the back and shouted, "Well, my boy, your father feels he's in for another great money-making day at the garage. I've got a few little beauties I'm going to flog to the idiots this morning. Where's my breakfast?" "It's coming, Treasure," Mrs. Wormwood called from the kitchen. Matilda kept her face bent low over her cornflakes. She didn't dare to look up. Why not? Because she didn't want to laugh. In the first place, she wasn't at all sure what she was going to see. And secondly, if she did see what she thought she was going to see, she couldn't trust herself to keep a straight face and not laugh. The son was looking directly ahead out the window, stuffing himself with bread and peanut butter and strawberry jam. The father was just moving around to sit in the head of the table when the mother came sweeping out of the kitchen, carrying a huge plate of piled high with eggs and sausage and bacon and tomatoes. She looked up. She caught sight of her husband, and she stopped dead in her tracks. Then she let out a scream that seemed to lift her right into the air, and she dropped the plate with a crash and a splash on the floor. Everyone jumped, including Mr. Wormwood. "What the heck's the matter with you, woman?" he shouted. "Look at the mess you've made on the carpet." And this is the picture. "Your hair!" The mother was shrieking, pointing and quivering at her husband. "Look at your hair! What have you done to your hair?" "What's wrong with my hair, for heaven's sake?" he said. "Oh my God, Dad! What have you done to your hair?" the son shouted. A splendid, noisy scene was building up nicely in the breakfast room. Matilda said nothing. She simply sat there admiring the wonderful effects of her own handiwork. Mr. Wormwood's fine crop of black hair was now a dirty silver, the color this time of a tightrope walker tights that had not been washed for the entire circus season, almost white. You've dyed it," shrieked the mother. "Why did you do it, you fool? It looks absolutely frightful. It looks horrendous. It looks ugly. You look like a freak." That's not nice. "What the blazes are you talking about?" the father yelled, putting both his hands to his hair. "I most certainly have not dyed it. What do you mean I've dyed it? What happened to it? Or is this something like a stupid joke?" His face was turning pale green, the color of sour apples. You must have dyed it, Dad, the son said. It's the same color as Mom's, only much dirtier looking. Of course he's dyed it, the mother cried. It can't change color all by itself that quickly. What on earth are you trying to do? Make yourself look handsome or something? You look like someone's grandmother that had her hair done wrong. Get me a mirror, the father yelled. Don't just stand there shrieking at me. Get me a mirror. The mother's handbag lay on the chair at the other end of the table. She opened the bag and got out a powder compact that had a small round mirror on the inside of the lid. She opened the compact and handed it to her husband. He grabbed it and held it right before his face. In doing so, spilled most of the powder all over the front of his fancy tweed jacket. Be careful, shrieked the mother. Now look what you've done. That's my best Elizabeth Arden face powder. My makeup. Do you know how much that costs? Oh my God, yelled the father, staring into the little mirror. What happened to me? I look terrible. I look just like you gone wrong. I can't go down to the garage and sell cars like this. How did this happen? He stared around the room, first at his mother, then at the son, and then at Matilda. How could it have happened? He yelled. Imagine, Daddy, Matilda said quietly. So I'm going to say that again because I read that wrong. Imagine, Daddy, Matilda said quietly, that you weren't looking very hard and you simply took Mommy's bottle of hair stuff off the shelf instead of your own. Of course that's what's happened, the mother cried. Well, really, Harry, how stupid can you get? Why didn't you read the label before you started splashing the stuff all over your head? Mine's terribly strong. I'm only meant to use 1 tablespoon of it, which is like, I don't know, maybe like if you were to have a spoon and you filled maybe 3 of them, it's not much. He spilled it all over his hair, so that's a lot. I'm only meant to use 1 tablespoon of it in a whole basin of water, and you've gone and put it all over your head. It'll probably take all your hair off. Is your scalp beginning to burn, my dear? You mean I'm going to lose my hair? The husband yelled. I think you will, the mother said. Peroxide is a very powerful chemical. It's what they put down the laboratory to disinfect the pan and only give it another name. That's when they clean the toilet. Ooh. What are you saying? The husband crying now. I'm not a lavatory pan or a toilet bowl. I don't want to be disinfected. Even diluted like I use it, the mother told him. It makes a good deal of my hair fall out. So goodness knows what's going to happen to you. I am surprised it didn't take the whole of your top of your head off. What shall I do? Wailed the father. Tell me, quick, what to do before it stops falling out. Matilda said, I'd give it a good old wash, Dad, if I were you, with soap and water, but you'll have to hurry. Will that change the color back to black? The father asked anxiously. Of course it won't, you stupid person, the mother said. Then what do? I can't go around looking like this forever. You'll have to dye it black. You'll have to dye it back black, the mother said. But wash it out first, or there won't be anything to dye. Right, the father shouted, springing into action. Get me an appointment with your hairdresser this instant for a hair dyeing job. Tell them it's an emergency. They've got to boot someone else off their list. I'm going upstairs to wash it now. With that, the man dashed out to the room, and Mrs. Wormwood sighed deeply, went to the telephone and called the beauty parlor. He does some pretty silly things now and again, doesn't he, Mommy? Matilda said. The mother, dialing the number on the phone, said, I'm afraid men are not always quite as clever as they think they are. You will learn that when you get a bit older, my girl. I'm going to read a little bit more of the next chapter. It's called Miss Honey, and I love this character. She's one of my favorite ones. Matilda was a little late in starting school. Most children began primary school, or elementary school like we call it, at 5 or even just before. But Matilda's parents, who weren't very concerned, one way or another, about their daughter's education, had forgotten to make the proper arrangements in advance. When she was 5.5, she entered school for the first time. Now, think about how old you were when you entered school, probably right around 5, in kindergarten. Or maybe young 5, so you were a little younger. The village school for young children was a bleak brick building called Crensham Hall Primary School. It had about 250 pupils, aged from 5 to just under 12 years old. And pupils means students in American English. The head teacher, the boss, the supreme commander of the establishment, was a formidable middle-aged lady whose name was Miss Trunchbull. Now remember her, because she's going to be our protagonist, along with Mom and Dad. Naturally, Matilda was put in the bottom of the class, where there were 18 other small boys and girls around the same age as her. Their teacher was called Miss Honey. She could not have been more than 23 or 24 years old. She had a lovely, pale, oval Madonna face with blue eyes and hair that was light brown. Her body was so slim and fragile that one got the feeling if she fell over, her face would smash into 1,000 pieces, like a porcelain figure. So, do you remember figurative language? Do you remember which one this is? It's exaggeration. Hyperbole is correct. Miss Jennifer Honey was a mild and quiet person who never raised her voice and was seldom seen to smile. But there was no doubt she possessed that rare gift of being adored by every small child under her care. She seemed to understand totally her bewilderment and fear that so often overwhelmed young children who for the first time in their lives are hurled into a classroom and told to obey orders in a classroom. Some curious warmth that was almost tangible shone out of Mrs. Honey's face when she spoke to a confused and homesick newcomer to the class. Miss Trunchbull, the head mistress, or principal as we call it in America, was something else altogether. She was a gigantic holly terror, a fierce monster who frightened the lives out of all of the students and teachers alike. There was an aura of menace about her, even at distance. And when she came up close to you, you could almost feel the dangerous heat radiating from her as a form of red-hot metal. When she marched, Mrs. Trunchbull never walked. She always marched like a stormtrooper with long strides and her arms swinging. When she marched along the corridor, you could actually hear her snorting as she went. As if a group of children happened to be in her path, she plowed right through them like a tank, with small people bouncing off of her to left and right, not caring who was at her side. Thank goodness we don't meet many people like her in this world, although they do exist, and all of us are likely to come across at least one of them in our lifetime. If you ever do, you should behave as you would if you met an estranged rhinoceros. You should behave as if you were to meet an enraged rhinoceros. Why can't I say that word? I'm going to say hippo instead, even though it's not. I just can't say that word right now. Out in the bush, climbed up the nearest tree, and stay there until it had gone away. This woman, in all her eccentricities and her appearances, is almost impossible to describe. But I shall make some attempt to do so a little later on, for she's quite horrible and nasty. Let us leave her for the moment and go back to Matilda and her first day in Mrs. Honey's class. After the usual business of going through all the names of the children, Mrs. Honey handed out the brand new exercise book to each pupil or student. "You have all brought your own pencils, I hope," she said. "Yes, Miss Honey," they chanted. And here's Miss Honey. Good. Now this is the very first day of school for each one of you. Good. Now this is the very first day of school for each one of you. It is the beginning of at least 11 long years of schooling that all of you are going to have to go through. And 6 of those years will be spent right here at Crunchum Hall, where, as you know, your headmistress, Mrs. Trunchbull, let me for your own good tell you something about Mrs. Trunchbull. She insisted upon strict discipline throughout the school, and if you are to take my advice, you will do your very best to behave yourself in her presence. Never argue with her. Never answer back. Always do as she says. If you get on the wrong side of Mrs. Trunchbull, she can make your life horrible. It's nothing to laugh about, Lavender. Take that grin off your face. All of you will be wise to remember that Mrs. Trunchbull deals very, very strictly with anyone who gets out of line at this school. Have you got the message? Do not get on her bad side. Yes, Miss Honey, chirped 18 eager little voices. I myself, Miss Honey went on, want to help you learn as much as possible while you are in this class. This is because I know it will make things easier for you later on. For example, by the end of this week, I shall expect every one of you to know the 2 times table by heart. They're in kindergarten, you guys. Whoa, we started learning that this year. And in a year's time, I hope you will know all the multiplication tables up to 12. Again, they're in kindergarten. We did this in 3rd grade. It will help you enormously if you do. Now then, do any of you happen to have learned the 2 times table already? Matilda put her hand quickly up. She was the only one. Miss Honey looked at her carefully, at the tiny girl with dark hair and round, serious face, sitting in the 2nd row. Oh, wonderful, she said. Please stand up and recite as much as you can. Matilda stood up and began to say the 2 times table. When she got to 2 times 12 is 24, she didn't stop. She went on right with her 2 times 13 is 26. Twice 14 is 28. Twice 15 is 36. Twice 16 is... Stop, Miss Honey said. She had been listening slightly spellbound at this smooth recital, and now she said, How far can you go? How far, Matilda said. Well, I don't really know, Miss Honey. For quite a long ways, I think. Miss Honey took a few moments to let this curious statement sink in. You mean, she said, that you could tell me what 2 times 28 is? Yes, Miss Honey. What is it? 56, Miss Honey. What about something much harder like 2 times 487? Could you tell me that? I think so. Yes, said Matilda. Are you sure? Well, yes, Miss Honey, I'm fairly sure. What is it then? 2 times 487. 974, Matilda said immediately. She spoke quietly and politely and without any sign of showing off. Miss Honey gazed at Matilda with absolute amazement. But when she spoke next, she kept her voice leveled. This is really splendid, she said, but of course multiplying by 2 is a lot easier than some other big numbers. What about other multiplication tables? Do you know any of those? What do we think? Yes or no? I think yes. I think so, Miss Honey. I think I do. Which ones, Matilda? How far have you got? I don't quite know, Matilda said. I don't really know what you mean. What I mean is, do you know, for instance, the 3 times tables? Yes, Miss Honey. And the 4 times tables? Yes, Miss Honey. Well, how many do you know, Matilda? Do you know all the way up to 12 times tables? Yes, Miss Honey. What about 12 sevens? Wait, what are 12 sevens? 84, Matilda said. Miss Honey paused and leaned back in her chair, behind the plain table that stood in the middle of the floor in front of the class. She was considerably shaken by the exchange, but took no care to show it. She had never come across a 5-year-old before, or indeed a 10-year-old for that matter, who could multiply with such easiness. "I hope the rest of you are listening to this," she said to the class. "Matilda is a very lucky girl. She has wonderful parents who have already taught her to multiply lots of number. Was it your mother, Matilda, who taught you?" She's wrong, right? Yes, she did it by herself. Her parents are horrible. "No, Miss Honey, it wasn't." "So you must have a great father then. He must be a brilliant teacher." "Oh, no, Miss Honey," Matilda said quietly. "My father didn't teach me." "You mean you taught yourself?" "I don't quite know," Matilda said truthfully, also a little embarrassed now. It's just that I don't find it very difficult to multiply one number by another." Miss Honey took a deep breath and let out very slowly. What do we think she's feeling? I think she's in an amazement. She doesn't know what to think. She looked again at the small girl with bright eyes standing beside her desk, so sensible and solemn. "You say you don't find it difficult to multiply one number by another?" Miss Honey said. "Could you try to explain it a little bit?" "Oh, dear," Matilda said. "I'm not really sure." Miss Honey waited. The class was silent, all listening, watching her. "For instance," Miss Honey said, "if I asked you to multiply 14 by 19, no, that's too difficult." "It's 266, Matilda said softly, very quickly. Miss Honey stared at her, then picked up a pencil and quickly worked out the sum on a piece of paper. "What did you say it was?" she asked, looking up. 266, Matilda said. Miss Honey put down her pencil and removed her spectacles, or glasses, and began to polish a lens with one piece of tissue. The class remained quiet, watching her, and waiting for her to see what was next. Matilda was still standing up beside her desk. "Now tell me, Matilda," Miss Honey said, still polishing. "Try to tell me exactly what goes on inside your head when you get a multiplication problem like that. You obviously have to work it out in some way, but you seem to be able to arrive to the answer almost immediately. It's quite amazing. Take the one you've just done, 14 multiplied by 19. How do you do it? What goes on in your mind?" I simply put the 14 down in my head and multiply it by 19, Matilda said. "I'm afraid I don't know how else to explain it. I've always said to myself that if a little pocket calculator could do it, why can't I?" "Why not indeed?" Miss Honey said. "The human brain is quite an amazing thing." "I think it's a lot better than a lump of metal," said Matilda. "That's all a calculator is. My mind is much more wonderful." "How right you are," Miss Honey said. "Pocket calculators are not allowed in the school anyway." Miss Honey was feeling quite quivery and unsure of what was happening. There was no doubt in her mind that she had met a truly extraordinary mathematical brain in her classroom, and words like child genius and prodigy went flitting through her head. She knew that these sort of wonders do pop up in the world from time to time, but only once or twice in 100 years. After all, Mozart was only 5 when he started composing for the piano, and look what happened to him. And think of Albert Einstein, she thought. "It's not fair," Lavender said. "How can you do it and we can't?" "Don't worry, Lavender. You'll soon catch up," Miss Honey said, lying through her teeth. She knew that wasn't possible, for this child was truly magnificent. At this point, Miss Honey could not resist the temptation of exploring still further the mind of this astonishing child. She knew that she ought to be paying some attention to the rest of the class, but she was all right together, too excited to let that matter rest. "Well," she said, pretending to address the whole class, "let us leave sums for the moment and see if any of us have begun to spell. What do we think? Can she do it?" "I think so, too." "Hands up if anyone can spell cat." 3 hands went up. They belonged to Lavender, a small boy, Nigel, and to Matilda. Spell cat, Nigel. Nigel spelled it. Miss Honey now decided to ask a question that she normally would have never asked or dreamed of asking the class the first day. I wonder, she said, whether any of you 3 know how to spell cat, have learned how to read whole groups of words when they are strung together in a sentence. I have, Nigel said proudly. So have I, Lavender said. Miss Honey went to the blackboard and wrote with her white chalk the sentence, I have already begun to learn how to read long sentences. She had purposely made it difficult, and she knew there were precious few 5-year-olds around who would be able to manage that sentence. Can you tell me what it says, Nigel? She asked. Oh, that's too hard, Nigel said, a little embarrassed. Lavender? Well, the first word is I, Lavender said. Wonderful, said Miss Honey. Great. Can anyone read the whole sentence? Miss Honey said, waiting for the yes that she felt certain was going to come from Matilda. Yes, said Matilda. Go ahead, Miss Honey said. Matilda read the sentence without any hesitation at all. I have already begun to learn how to read long sentences, she read on the board. That's really very good indeed, Matilda, Miss Honey said, making the understatement of her life. How much can you read, Matilda? I think I can read most things, Miss Honey, Matilda said, although I'm afraid I can't always understand the meanings. Miss Honey got to her feet and walked smartly out of the room, but was back in 30 seconds carrying a thick stack of books. She opened it at random and placed it on Matilda's desk. This is a book of humorous poetry, so funny poetry, she said. See if you can read one aloud. Smoothly, without a pause, at the nice speed, Matilda began to read. And if you remember, oh, this is a long video, I didn't realize. Oops. So if you remember, she's been going to the library by herself and has been reading adult books for years and years and years and years and years. So Miss Honey is in for a shock. But this is where I'm going to stop because I didn't realize I've been reading for so long. I really love this book. So we will learn more about what Matilda can do and about Miss Honey. So I will see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. And I will start setting up schedules for Zoom. I will start also figuring out how we can do our writer's notebook sharing. So that means if you've not been doing your writer's notebook, I highly suggest you do so that you have something nice to share. It could be poetry, it could be a list, could be a letter, it could be a story, could be a comic. You know the drill. All right. Goodbye, my beautiful children. Mwah.